Good evening. So, there's been some good news today and over the last few weeks, if you're open to seeing it, right? There has been a good number, at least 4 anyway, locations that were set for IPAS housing or whatever you want to call it, that have been withdrawn or have stopped, right? This is a drastic U-turn, if you will, right? There's one up in the posh side of Dublin as well that was objected to, and of course, fair enough, that won't go ahead, and sure, that's lovely, right? But there's a change. There's a change in the aggressiveness. There is a change in the gung-ho attitude of this government, and there is a change also in the perspective of people, or the perspective that people are having around these topics, right? So that's a positive, and long may it continue, and may all the pressure in the world, the pressure that we get to see and experience and hear about, and the untold pressure, the pressure that we don't get to see, let that continue to be applied to this government from the people and from whatever external sources that may be applying it. All is welcome, right? Anything to get back to steering our ship effectively. Something that we haven't done for generations, right? We continue on that. And the next one then, there'll be 3. The next one is that Klaus Schwab has resigned from the World Economic Forum, right? So this lunatic who wanted to lock everything down, to destroy the economies of the West, to dismantle the infrastructure in Western civilization, and to build up a new infrastructure. I hold the belief that it was his intention or his desire that we would be locked down until the year 2030, coinciding right with the timeline for the article from the WEF that you will own nothing and you will be happy, 2030, right? I think we were supposed to come out into this new smart city world where all electric vehicles, you can't go so far outside of your districts, right? Or your car will just cease to exist, right? Everything you own will be borrowed from the state, up to and including your own spatulas. This is the article, right? So this is the world that he had envisioned for people, for you, having never met the man, and the man probably never having set foot inside in this country. He was dictating and deciding things to you, for you. Not on his own, of course, but he's a figurehead for these. He's the mouthpiece for these ideologies, right? It's nearly better to kind of look at things in that way, that he embodies a particular ideology. So the man himself is irrelevant, right? It's what he's speaking, the ideology and the view he has that he wishes to impose on other people. That's the important thing. Because just because this guy has resigned doesn't mean there's not 2 other people that are going to be vying for permission or vying for position to take his place, right? And of course they will learn from this. They will adopt their approach. They might not be so blatant about it in the future if they get another roll of the dice, right? But they will hold the same ideology or a very similar ideology. And part of the WEF's agenda was a relentless stream of immigration, because it serves 2 purposes, right? It keeps open, and it keeps, in theory at least, a conveyor belt of workers being pumped into countries, Western nations, right? And that will keep the wages low, because these guys are also shareholders in loads of big companies, right? That they don't want to go out of business because they siphon money out of people through these companies and organizations. So they don't want them to go bust, but they also want the Western populations depleted and weakened and servile. But recognizing that the fertility rates across the West are not meeting the number needed for a generational replacement, right? And knowing that if a society is not replacing its old with its young, you're going to get a top-heavy society, which is going to be more dependent on pensions, state purse, right? It's going to cost these guys money because they don't, once people retire, obviously they're not working in these places or companies or whatever. So they're not adding to the coffers of these guys, the shareholders of these big businesses and the members of these think tanks, right? That get in and make decisions and formulate plans and then implement them with governments via policy and laws and regulations around hiring and businesses and all that sort of stuff, right? So they open the borders, right? They import everything under the name of a charitable heart. Sure, didn't Paddy Murphy go to New York in 1850 after watching all of his family starve to death, right? And he was the only one of his remaining family that he was aware of that managed to stay alive, and he got out and he went to America and he was treated like shit and he had to fight and scrap for every single thing he had. There was no handouts. There was none of that. There was no America paying for Paddy to bring his dog over, and here's a car, Paddy, and here's a house, Paddy, and here's medical health, Paddy, and medical insurance for yourself, Paddy, ahead of the Americans, and come on, Paddy, and we'll put you up in the finest of quarters. There was none of that stuff, right? Many Irish went over and starved in ditches there just as they were trying to get away with from Ireland at the time, right? So misery followed, but sure, shouldn't we then allow, because this happened, shouldn't we allow our homeland to be wrecked and ruined and be demographically replaced by people who've no business and no history in this country, and no business and no history with us as people, right? Shouldn't you allow that? Because, sure, isn't that what Irish is? No, it's not, right? This is an ideology that's been pumped into your mind. You've been manipulated into accepting this because you hear it so often. It seeps into your pores. That's how prevalent it is, right? And you just accept it because you don't hear people disagreeing with it, because the people largely don't have the time to be reading anything or to be looking at anything or evaluating anything, right? Or analysing things. People are stressed enough, and with the little bit of free time they have, they want to enjoy themselves instead of adding more questions to the head, right? People want to lighten the load and not make the mind weighed down with burdensome questions that they can't possibly answer on their own, right? Or so they believe. So Klaus Schwab has retired or resigned from the WEF, and there's allegations of discrimination in it, sexual harassment, God knows what else. I remember at one of his speeches, he was wearing this just really but Star Trek kind of outfit, right? And you can imagine the kind of nonsense that goes along with that stuff, right? Dangerous nonsense, dark nonsense. So this leads us to the third thing then, right? So Pope Francis is dead. I don't care. That man means nothing to me other than the judgment I have in my own mind of him and his actions and the things he speaks about and the things he's seen to be doing, or was seen to be doing. All he is to me is a man that lives in Italy, right? He is no padre or no father of mine. He is no shepherd of my faith or my belief. He's nothing to me. He's just an old man that died who lived in Italy, right? However, he was also an incredibly powerful man, incredibly influential man. He was the leader of the Catholic faith. And so you judge him by his fruits, as the Bible says, right? And what are his fruits? His fruits are a total antipathy to Western civilization. He was all for the importation of immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, all that sort of stuff, right? He wished to emotionally and morally blackmail you into thinking that was your duty on this earth, is to open up your nation's borders for any and all. At the same time, he's seen, knowing that the people coming into the West were largely Muslims. What he does then is he goes on camera, right? washes Muslims' feet. Off you go in the privacy of your own bedroom, right? Whatever you want to do, or the privacy of your own home or back garden. Do what you want. But what sort of message is that sending to a very hostile and combative, historically and currently, faith, people of a faith that wishes for total world governance, final world governance? It is built into their belief that the words that they follow and the guidance they follow is final. They are the final message, right? And he's on his knees washing these people's feet as he's encouraging Western people to wave the welcome flags to these people. He is giving the message to them that the West is done. It is submitting to them. And him, as the head of, whether I like it or not, right, as the head of Western man's religion and faith, he is on his knees washing the feet of those who wish to enter the West to conquer it. That is a disgusting message to send. It's hidden beneath humility and serving others, and didn't Christ have his feet washed, and wasn't that a great thing, right? It's hidden beneath all of that nonsense. But looking at it from a man watching the actions of another man and recognizing the lay of the land in his land, you see it for what it is. That is the green light to go there and take over and do what you want. You have my backing and my submission, right? So these are filthy messages to be sending. In addition to this, he felt that it was people's moral duty to get the COVID vaccine, knowing absolutely nothing about it that we know of, because if we accept the timeline of these things as they are presented to us, he couldn't have known anything about it, right? He could not have known anything about it. And people will use this as a defense as well. That, well, look, doctors that said you get the COVID vaccine, it's not their fault that people ended up having reactions to it because they couldn't have known. Of course they couldn't have known. But they needed to know that they didn't know and that they couldn't have known. And therefore not put someone into the position of accepting what they say on the authority of who it comes from, Pope included. Right? We don't know the totality of the misery and suffering that these things have caused to people. We don't know yet. Right? And it's hard to be able to see a frame where you can account for the total of misery and suffering that is followed from these things, be it lockdowns or the vaccinations. We just don't know, right? But we know that there was suffering and misery because we all have a personal story at this point of a friend who just seemed to fall off a cliff right after getting it, or in the weeks after getting it, right? We know these things. We trust our senses, right? We trust our senses. So it also reminded me of do you remember when Trump first visited the Vatican? And people were saying how shocking it is that Melania and Ivanka would show up there in black gowns and looking forlorn and somber. And even one of them even had a veil on front of her face. I think it was Melania. And it looked like they were attending the Pope's funeral. Right? That was the symbolism of it. That was the symbolism of it. And it's just bizarre. Right? And also, this man was also the leader of the Jesuits. First Jesuit Pope. Who are the Jesuits? They are a military order of the of Catholicism, of the Catholic faith, of Mother Church. That is their main aim in this world, is to prolong and expand the control and the dominance of Mother Church, of the Vatican, Roman Empire, right? That is their major priority. He was the leader of that. And what are the Jesuits up to? Much of what they do is hidden because these people go into positions where they pretend they're not Jesuits, right? They pretend they're not Jesuits. René Descartes was from a Jesuit, right? Jesuit school. Adam Weishaupt, the leader of the Illuminati, or the originator of the Illuminati group, also a Jesuit. But then they renounced it and went off to do other things, right? Of course. There's loads of these examples. There's a question mark around Eamon de Valera as to whether he was a Jesuit or not. It's known that he wished to become one, right? But it says that he didn't get taken in, okay? But their machinations they leave a print. They've been kicked out of, people talk about the Jews being expelled from every country they ever lived in. You can stick them right beside the Jesuits. They've been also kicked out of nearly every country they've been in. But in Ireland's case, what have they been up to? They're up to, through the, I forget the name of it now, right? But there's a Jesuit refugee society, I think, but it's a kind of a charity, right? It gets its funding from the HSE, it gets its funding from Fáilte Ireland, and it uses its own coffers, right? It also draws money from the EU. For what? For bringing in refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants, whatever you want to call them, for drawing people to Ireland from outside of Ireland, to trying to speed run them through direct provision into working life, citizenship. Ireland's your new home, right? Whatever business it is of a Catholic military order to be deciding what the demographics of Ireland are, speaks for itself, really. Does it need an answer? These people's main priority will never be anything for the betterment of Ireland, unless what is good for Ireland is also good for the Vatican. These people are not aligned to Irish people. That is not the vow they take. That is not the oath they keep. That is to Pope Francis, who was the head of this military order. And he's now dead. So whoever comes after, we will wait to see, right? And just another point on that as well. And I hesitate about bringing this up because people react in such kind of predictable ways as well, but overly emotional. They start saying things that back to you that you're not after saying, and they start reading things into what you say that it's irrational to see where they get it from at times, right? And then other people, most people are great and they understand it and they can deal with it. They can object to it and they can go, look, I don't agree with that because of this, right? But it's bizarre to me. And I try and think of what period in Irish history seems to be more suited to my own temperament or nature, right? And for whatever reason, it's a pre-Christian time. I don't identify with Christianity in any way. To me, it seems weak, unfinished, too restricted. It doesn't account or honor obvious experiences of human life in a way that I see as balanced. And because of that imbalance, I see how it can skew and warp a people, a follower, and a society, and not in healthy ways, right? They might get some things right, but because of the imbalance in it philosophically, because it's not a philosophical system, it's a theological system, right? So it fails in addressing certain situations that need to be addressed in order for balance to be in a culture, in a society. I think based on its sole nature, it fails in so many ways, right? It is heavily Gnostic in that it recognizes or it elevates the spiritual domain, whatever that is, right? As the heavenly realm, they would claim it. It elevates that above the material realm. It recognizes from its own system that the material realm and the senses are the passions and desires, and they're not good, and they lead you to sin, and therefore shun them, right? I don't abide by that at all, right? I think following this light and aiming only at the spiritual can lead to some of the biggest head cases you could possibly wish to encounter, right? Any extremes in either area, right, can lead to imbalance, and that affects people. It makes people sick, and it blinds people to realities that are obvious if you're not following a skewed system, right? So to see grown men talk about how great this man was, Pope Francis, it is bizarre to me. It stinks to me. Not that no one really cares what I think, but I'm just giving it out there because I wrestled with whether saying it or not, and I'm just going saying it, right? That it's pathetic to me. It's pathetic. As an Irishman, and we were non-Christians, non-Catholics for far greater stretches of time than we were ever Catholics, right? That we were, and what is Catholic? It is a devotee to the Roman system of theology and governance and social norms, social etiquette, right? And social morality. That's what it is. You can't be a Catholic unless you see the Pope as the head of your table, unless you're a follower of Rome, right? And if you're not, then, well, you're not a Catholic then, by definition, right? If you've some other personal relationship with Jesus, great, because I think that is the answer, right? I think that is the answer, or a answer to it anyway, because I see it as just degrading, seeing grown men, leaders of political parties, talking about how great this man was, what an excellent leader he was. He wasn't. I gave you a few examples of the actions and the ideas that he sided with have had massively detrimental effects on Irish people. So where is your allegiance? To some father figure that you claim because of your religious faith, or that you pretend to claim because you think it gets you votes? Or is your allegiance to the Irish people? It's as simple as that. Because no Irishman, prior to the dominance of Catholicism in Ireland, right, the Roman system of governance, prior to that, no Irish man needed any vicar to stand between him, to connect him to anything divine or anything of life, the spirit, the nyart of nature, right? The power built into nature, the theophany of God, right? God manifesting in this world, because he's in it, right? That was the Irish perspective in it. Nature was as abundant with life as you needed. The idea of an afterlife and going to some pleasant place. We see this in Oisin and Patrick. It was the Oisin and Patrick arguments. The idea that you could be brought away into a better world outside of Ireland with your people and the landscape of Ireland around you. That was a nonsense to Irish people. As Oisin said, if my father and the Fianna Fionn, if they're in hell and they're not allowed in heaven, I'll gladly go to hell to meet these people. I don't want no part of your heaven if my people aren't going to be there. Right? It was rejected by many. And to see people grovelling and sniffing around the feet of this disgusting man. The power and influence he has, and look at the decisions and the ideas he threw his weight behind, and the organisation he was the head of, that carried out, that brought reality to the ideas he supported in Ireland, which had a lot of their funds withdrawn with the USAID, right? So this thing is back with foreign coin in pummeling Ireland, and this man was the head of one of the organisations of it, one of the wings of it, if not outrightly, right? Because otherwise he could have come out and spoken about what's going on, but he didn't. He backed it, right? He backed it. So I don't care about this man. And the Irish argument of let's not speak ill of the dead, why? So when someone dies after being horrible or backing things that are destructive to your life and to your way of living and to your people, when they die, all of a sudden that's forgotten about. We only talk about the positive parts of them. Absolutely not. I reject that wholeheartedly. If someone is a villain and they've done horrible things, let that be spoken about forever. That's the hell. That's the Irish version of hell, where your name is alive forever to be scorned by people who remember and that hear of your actions. Your name is forever tarnished, And it's not even given the rest or the freedom of being forgotten. It's to be resuscitated endlessly by people who read your deeds and hear about what kind of person you were. Never forget, right? That's what I give to people who lived as scoundrels and then scurried off into debt, hoping that their debt will bring them absolution from people's memory. Of course not. Of course not. And I think that is the morally superior view to have than forgiving evil simply because that person no longer breathes. That person might be dead, but the consequences of what they've done are still alive in people who have to deal with them now and that are burdened with those consequences. So just because one man dies doesn't mean his terror ends.